Welcome to Kansas Ag Report. I'm Sarah Rajas. On this week's show, we'll have our monthly update with Ag and Tax Law Specialist Dr. Roger McEowen from the Washburn School of Law. We'll also have updates from Kansas Wheat, Kansas Corn, and the Kansas Farm Bureau, along with our weekly updates from Kansas Livestock Association and market information from Pinion.
Kansas Ag Report brought to you in part by the Kansas Soybean Commission, the Soybean Checkoff, progress powered by Kansas farmers. Kansas Farm Bureau, a grassroots ag organization representing the state's farm and ranch families since 1919, kfb.org. And the Kansas Wheat Commission, lending in the adoption of profitable innovations from wheat, online at kswheat.com.
In agricultural news, a newly released life cycle assessment found that the U.S. soybean industry's global warming potential profile decreased considerably in 2021 in regards to whole soybeans, soybean meal, and soy oil, compared to previously reported findings in 2015 and 2010. Commissioned by the United Soybean Board and the National Oilseed Processors Association, the study assessed the main drivers of the environmental impact, including soybean cultivation and harvesting, transportation, and energy usage during processing. The United Soybean Board CEO, Lucas Lynch, says this body of research helps farmers better assess and understand soy's contribution to the environmental impacts throughout the life cycle of the entire soybean value chain. The study found that the soybean industry's carbon footprint decreased considerably in 2021 for all U.S. soy commodities compared to 2015. That data includes a 19% decrease for U.S. soybeans, a 6% decrease for U.S. soybean meal, a 22% decrease for U.S. crude soy oil, and an 8% decrease for U.S. refined soy oil. And USDA released data from the 2022 Census of Agriculture. The results show a 7% decline in the number of farms and a 2% decline in farmland since 2017. The report also shows the average age of the American farmer rose to 58.1 years old, previously reported as 57.5 years old in 2017. The number of farms in Kansas during 2022 was a reported 55,734, down 5% from the 2017 Census of Agriculture. Farmland in the latest census was reported at 44.8 million acres, which turned out to be down 2% from that reported 5 years prior. Farmland accounted for 85.6% of total land area in the state and 38.9% in the United States. The average farm size in Kansas was 804 acres, up 3% or 22 acres from 2017. Also included in the report, total value of agricultural products sold in 2022 was up 28% from 2017, now at $24 billion. Also, of the total value of production, 65% originated from livestock with 35% from crops. Average net income per farm was $73,058. This was up 48% from 2017. And the number of young producers, defined as age 34 or less, was reported to be 9,700, or 10% of all producers. The number of female producers was 34,579, or 34% of all producers. That's our news this week. When we come back, we'll talk with Dr. Roger McEowen from the Washburn School of Law. Stay with us.
Kansas Ag Report brought to you in part by Kansas Grain Sorghum, growers working together. Learn more at ksgrainsorghum.org. Grass and Grain, online or in the mail, keeping Kansas farmers informed for over 60 years. grassandgrain.com.
And time once again for our monthly conversation with Dr. Roger McEowen for the Washburn School of Law. He's an ag and tax law specialist. Dr. McEowen, always good to see you.
Well, good to be with you, Ken. Appreciate it.
Well, as we kind of keep this rolling along, it didn't seem like very long ago we talked about 2023 and all the different things, and sure looks like to me what we're going to talk about today is 2024 is this kind of a continuation, and let's get into some of these. I mean, farm bankruptcy, Chapter 12 bankruptcy, back at it.
Yeah, we're seeing some more of these can come through the pipeline. I think that's going to be a trend we'll continue to see throughout 2024. But of course, Chapter 12 is for qualified family farmers. It's only for people that can qualify as a family farmer. It's for nobody else. And it's to reorganize the farm business. And it came out of the farm debt crisis of the 80s. But a key point of it is that you have to put a reorganization plan together that tells the bankruptcy court how you're going to reorganize your business and pay off some of your debt and continue going forward in your farming operation. And that has to be feasible. And what we had was a recent case in Kansas on that feasibility issue. And the debt got restructured. They made the first year's payment and then couldn't make the second year payment. And we're asking the court for more time to put together financing and more loans so that they could avoid foreclosure. And the end result was the court gave them as much slack as possible, but then finally said, look, you're going to have to come up with in 2 weeks a serious plan that is feasible as to how you're going to go forward, or we're going to dismiss the case. So it comes back to that point of being feasible, and that's based on all the facts and circumstances.
All right, here's another one. You can't sue the government.
Well, you might be able to sue the government, and that this case went all the way to the U.S. Supreme Court, and it was a borrower from the USDA's Rural Housing Authority Service, and they paid off their loans by the middle of 2018, but yet USDA apparently didn't correct their records and kept telling consumer credit reporting companies that the loan was in default. Of course, that messes up that individual's credit score and their ability to get favorable interest rates on loans. And USDA repeatedly did that, and after being notified, wouldn't correct the record. So the individual sued them, and USDA tried to dismiss the case, saying, "Hey, we're the big bad federal government. You can't sue us. That's the doctrine of sovereign immunity." And the Supreme Court of the United States said, "Now, wait a minute. There is a way that that can be waived if Congress, in the particular act at issue, has specifically waived it." And they said that that is exactly what Congress did with respect to the Fair Credit Reporting Act. So there actually, Ken, there's a lot of loans that are made by governmental entities that route through that act. And so that is a very big case for a lot of people.
So I guess those that maybe think the federal government does no wrong, they're proven right.
Sometimes the government does do wrong.
We're talking with Dr. Roger McEowen for the Washburn School of Law. We're going to take a quick break. We'll talk about more what's going on with agriculture in the courtroom in just a moment.
Kansas Ag Report brought to you in part by the Kansas Livestock Association, supporting members' business interests and meeting consumer demands. KLA.org. Oldie Seed Farms, carrying soil-specific seed. Find them on the web at oldieseed.com. That's OHLDE seed.com. And Kansas Corn, building the future at kansascorn.com.
And our guest is Dr. Roger McEowen for the Washburn School of Law. He is an ag and tax law specialist, joins us every month to talk about agriculture in the courtroom and kind of some of the things as we kind of roll along. And boy, here's another one. Farm leases. Farm leases is so important, and it's all kind of in a way that not only structured, but kind of the way you read those leases.
Right. And farm lease law is different from state to state. This happens to be a case from Northwest Kansas. And it was a written cash lease that was entered into in 2020. And it said that the tenant could harvest any wheat crop that was planted in the fall of 2020 or in any fall thereafter if the lease was not terminated, if it just renewed. And it said that crops planted during the term of the lease were to be planted on a rotational basis rather than continuous crop fashion, unless there was adequate moisture present and the landlord consented. And that's actually, Ken, a fairly common term in Northwest Kansas and in Western Kansas where moisture is a concern. And it also said, well, you can continuous crop the irrigated ground. Well, he gets notice to terminate, and this is a calendar year lease. So it's going to go to the end of the year. It's going to terminate automatically on December 31, unless notice to terminate is given before that. He gets notice to terminate on August 27 of 2021. The land then changes hands. So you have a new owner that comes in. The new owner gives notice in early September. And the old owner also again gave notice. So this guy's got plenty of notice that the lease is up. But in October, he went in and harvested the corn from the irrigated ground while it was still high moisture corn, which he normally didn't do. And then told them, I'm going to plant wheat. And he plants wheat the next day. Well, that creates a problem, as you can imagine. The question is he entitled to the wheat? The court said, no, you're not. For two reasons. One, you had notice from the old owner and the new owner, and that's a key point. The new owner takes the land subject to the existing lease and has the obligation to terminate it if that's what they want to do. And the court said that's what they did. That's the first reason. And the second reason was you had a written lease that said when it terminated. So you always have to follow the terms of the written lease. And this was, unfortunate, I think probably miscommunication, but the right result by the court.
Right. And those are things that are so important. I know in other states there are specific days when those
Right.
leases expire or start back up again and so on. But the written lease, at least in Kansas, is what kind of leads the charge. All right. The last thing we want to talk about is one that probably will continue and could really have implications all over a lot of the Midwest. That is some property damage dealing on grassland, even farmland, with some of these underground pipelines.
Yeah, there are a lot of pipelines out there that are underneath farm and ranch land, and this happened to be one in Oklahoma that went to the 10th Circuit. Of course, Kansas is part of the 10th Circuit, so this is applicable law for us here in Kansas. But this is a pipeline underneath some ranch land in Oklahoma that was carrying gasoline and diesel, and some ranch hands smelled a diesel odor, fuel odor coming from a cave on the ranch, and they hired experts to test the soil and surface water and groundwater for possible hydrocarbon contamination. And the test did return trace amounts of refined petroleum products. And they couldn't resolve the issue with the energy company. And so there ends up being a lawsuit, and they sue for a whole bunch of things. Various trespass claims, various nuisance claims, unjust enrichment, all of those types of things. And the trial court lumped all of those claims together, which then meant they had to have a minimum level of contamination to be present to establish an injury. And the court said, well, you couldn't do that. So summary judgment to the energy company. Well, it goes on appeal to the 10th Circuit. And I think correctly so, the 10th Circuit said, now, wait a minute. On these various tort claims, there are different standards of care that apply to each independent tort that has been alleged. And so it was improper for the trial court just to lump everything together. And they have to look at the nuisance claims separately from the trespass claims, separately from the unjust enrichment claims. So this will be back at the trial court applying the proper standard and looking at each of those tort claims independently.
All right. Well, I'm sure this will be ongoing because we have others in other states that similar situations are going their way through state legislators to see what laws are, what may stick. So, all right, Dr. McEowen, if folks want to learn more, deeper dives into these subjects we've talked about, how can they find that?
My discussion of these cases is contained on my blog. You can reach that from the homepage of my website, and that's washburnlaw.edu/WALTR. I also share that with Ag Manager through the Ag Econ Department at K-State, so it can be found there also.
All right, Dr. McEowen, as always, appreciate your time, and we'll talk to you again soon.
Thank you, Ken.
Dr. Roger McEowen from the Washburn School of Law has joined us. We will take a break and come back with more in just a moment.
What if U.S. soybean meal were more than a commodity? If seed companies and the soybean checkoff built a better variety? That future is here. The time is now. To meet end-user demands, the soybean checkoff is investing in the compositional quality of soybeans, including meal. A message from the Kansas Soybean Commission, the Soybean Checkoff. Progress powered by Kansas farmers.
Kansas wheat farmers voiced their concerns and priorities for the next Farm Bill in January in the nation's capital as part of National Winter Wheat Meetings. Shayna DeGroat, Kansas Wheat Director of Membership and Government Affairs, who accompanied the group, said, Having farmers ask questions directly about policies and provide their perspective on what's going on in farm country adds emphasis and personal impact to national policy discussions. In Washington, D.C., the Kansas delegation met with counterparts from across the country during the National Association of Wheat Growers and U.S. Wheat Associates Winter Conference. As part of the larger fly-in organized by the National Association of Wheat Growers, Kansas wheat farmers and staff took to the Hill to communicate the importance of getting a farm bill passed before the current one-year extension expires and providing their input on meaningful changes that would benefit Kansas wheat producers. The group met with all 6 of the U.S. congressional offices representing the state of Kansas, including directly with U.S. Senator Jerry Moran. They reiterated the importance of maintaining crop insurance as the U.S. farm safety net, the need to double funding for export market, and increasing the reference price for wheat. The team outlined the inequalities in the distribution of the disaster payments under the 2022 Emergency Relief Program, which provided lower relief payments for higher levels of disaster. Off the Hill, the U.S. Wheat Associates Board of Directors elected Kansas wheat farmer Gary Miller-Shasky of Lakin as Secretary-Treasurer for the 2024-2025 fiscal year. As a member of the U.S. Wheat Officer Team, Miller-Shasky will provide a Kansas perspective and help guide the organization's work in more than 100 countries to develop and maintain and expand international markets. Made possible by the producer checkoff dollars managed by 17 state wheat commissions and cost share funding provided by USDA's Foreign Ag Service. Learn more about the opportunities to continue these policy discussions and the other benefits of joining the Kansas Association of Wheat Growers at kswheat.com/join.
The Kansas Wheat Innovation Center in Manhattan is rediscovering ways to get improved varieties and new genetics in the hands of farmers faster. Grower-led and checkoff-funded research initiatives are bringing about positive change. This grassroots leadership provides a strong voice in Topeka and Washington, D.C. Now is the time to partner with Kansas Wheat in moving wheat forward. Kansas Wheat Commission and Kansas Association of Wheat Growers. Farmers investing in their future and yours. Log on to rediscoverwheat.org.
Well, after we get the crop planted and it germinates, plants start growing. Once they get up in the neighborhood of a foot to 18 inches tall, we'll start irrigating that crop. In our part of the world, we only get like 17 inches of rainfall a year, so non-irrigated is basically raising the corn on whatever moisture is received from rainfall from Mother Nature. Irrigated corn is that we're applying water that's pumped out of an aquifer. A pivot, we call them center pivots. It basically has a tripod in the center of the field, and it has a pipe that goes out to the edge of the field, and it travels in a circle around that center point. And they can be any size. One span is usually like 180 feet. Traditionally in southwest Kansas, we refer to them as a quarter-mile pivot, which would have about 122 acres under it. A half-mile pivot would be a half-mile long and would have about 480 acres under it. It has a mechanism in the sprinkler that causes it to move. We can set, if we want to apply an inch per acre per week, we can set a speed at the pivot, and it controls that sprinkler system to where it'll make a rotation in a certain amount of time. And so somebody is watching that on a daily basis to make sure that sprinkler is moving and it doesn't get stuck or it doesn't have a mechanical problem. And if it does, then we fix that. Now we have some technology that through an app on our phones, we can look at it and it'll give us a warning, or it'll give us an alarm that tells us whether that sprinkler is stopped or not. We can fix that sprinkler. If it happens to be late at night and it's too dark to fix it that evening, we'll shut it off that evening, and then the next morning somebody will fix that sprinkler. So rather than sitting there in one spot and irrigating a spot that a lot more than it needs, we'll shut it off and fix it, and then start it again the next morning, so we can be a lot more efficient in our use of irrigation water. Well, deciding when to irrigate and how much water to apply is sometimes an art as much as it is science. And so we're continually evaluating the stage of growth of the plant that we're raising, the type of plant that we're raising. Some crops use more water than others. As technology has changed and improved, there's moisture probes that are buried out in the field. We're using that information to make more and better decisions on how much water is needed. Corn is more efficient in the amount of water that it uses, so again, that's one of the reasons we raise corn, is because we can get more bushels of grain out of the water that we're applying. Efficiency is of utmost important in irrigation. Our main goal is what can we do to apply that resource in as most efficient manner as possible.
Premier Farm and Home has what you need to make your lawn the best in the neighborhood.
Hi, I'm Ken. We choose Premier Farm and Home for the professional look that we do ourselves.
Feel free to stop in. You can also visit our website at heycow.com.
Ashley and Clint Hornberger farm and ranch in Douglas County on land that has been in the Hornberger family since 1872. The Hornbergers run a cow-calf operation and grow corn, soybeans, and brome hay. Their cattle herd is calved in the spring and fall to have year-round beef to sell direct to consumers. Their children, Case, CJ, and Cord, support the family's business efforts. The Hornbergers have served on the Douglas County Farm Bureau Board for many years. Ashley is currently president, and Clint served as president from 2012 to 2014. They also support statewide efforts on the YF&R committee and competed in the discussion meet. Ashley is active on the Douglas County Food Policy Council and volunteer promoter of the Baldwin City Farmers Market. Clint is the Assistant Chief Training Officer for the Willow Springs Township Fire District No. 3 and coaches youth sports teams. They appreciate the relationships they form through Farm Bureau and take advantage of growth opportunities provided by the association.
Imagine turning soybean oil, used cooking oils, and waste animal fats into fuel so amazing it drives U.S. jobs and our economy forward. Learn more about biodiesel at americasadvancedbiofuel.com.
The Kansas Livestock Foundation is accepting scholarship applications for the 2024-25 school year. Applicants must be graduates of a Kansas high school and enrolled at a Kansas community or senior college for the fall semester. The Merck Cartridges for Cash program offers $1,500 scholarships to Kansas State University College of Veterinary Medicine students and $1,000 awards to undergraduates studying animal science and planning to actively participate in livestock production. Additionally, since Haskell County KLA members turned in the most cartridges in 2023, at least one student from that county will receive a Cartridges for Cash scholarship, providing there is a qualified applicant. Hampel Oil and Mobile Delvac will offer $1,000 scholarships. Go Bob America's Ranch Equipment also will sponsor a $1,000 award. Equity Bank is offering a $2,500 scholarship through the foundation, while Rally House is sponsoring a $1,000 award. Proceeds from the 2023 Kansas Cattlewomen Silent Auction and KLF Club Calf Sale will fund $1,000 scholarships. Stipends in the amount of $1,500 will be offered in memory of Douglas A. Lau. Glenn and Clyde Lindstrom scholarships in the amount of $1,000 also are being offered, with preference given to students attending USD 400. A $1,000 scholarship will be offered by Scott Johnson and family. A $500 award will be offered in memory of Fred H. Woodbury, with preference given to a student residing in Chase, Franklin, Lyon, Osage, or Wabaunsee County.
One application applies to all scholarships and can be accessed by going to KLA.org and clicking on Programs. All materials must be submitted by April 8th.
More farmers and ranchers than ever have chosen to be BQA certified.
Hello, this is Jake McCall with Pinion Ag. The market has been quite active in all areas this week with no shortage of data to discuss. In a time with little focus on U.S. production news, the trade is carefully examining export data, ethanol production, South American harvest, and political machinations around the world. That being said, as we start with the grain markets, it is likely that most of our action this week has had little to do with fundamentals. It has long been known that the managed money funds are heavily short in the grain markets, and they remain so. But in the past 2 weeks, we have seen some lifting of those positions ahead of the March WASDE report that came out this week. The WASDE report, though, pales in terms of importance when compared to the end-of-the-month planning intentions release, which will be accompanied by the quarterly stocks report. In terms of fundamental information, we did have a pretty quiet ethanol report where we averaged 1.057 million barrels for daily production, which was down 1.9% from last week and up 4.7% from last year. This did set a record for ethanol stocks for this week in the year, breaking last year's record by 0.73 million barrels. On the export side, things were strong but not blown out of the water, with corn, wheat, and soy meal all within expectations, while soybeans actually surprised to the upside at 613,500 tons for the week ending February 29. On the cattle side, the cutout continues to work higher above the $300 level, strongly supported by lean trim markets. Fat cattle trade over the past week has largely been in the range of 182 to 185, with a little bit of 186 sprinkled in here at the end of the week. Depending on the location, as packers have been slowing chain speed and cutting slaughter numbers in an effort to keep a lid on prices for the moment. Cattle have traded largely sideways over the past 30 days, especially in the deferred contracts, and it may be time that we'll need to see some development in prices as the April board remains premium to cash by a few dollars. In outside markets, crude oil remains in a solid upward channel as it meets resistance around the $80 mark. Equity futures stare down new highs, and the dollar has taken a beating over the last couple days. If you would like to work on your marketing plan or have any questions about the markets, we'd love to talk to you about it. You can call us anytime at 888-452-8751. My name is Jake McCall with Pinion Ag, and I hope you have a great day.
That's our show this week. Be social with us online at kansasagreport.net and on our social media channels. I'm Sarah Rajas. Thanks for joining us today, and we'll see you next week for another edition of the Kansas Ag Report.
Many seed companies claim to offer the latest genetics, but how many have tested those genetics in soils just like yours? The Oldie Seed Know to Grow research program has fully tested the latest seed genetics in soils that are right in your neighborhood. The Oldie Seed Know to Grow program can recommend the best performing hybrids from technologies like Enlist, Extend, and Liberty Link that will optimize the yield and profit of every acre on your farm. Contact Oldie Seed today.